The Mi'kmaq people have been existing in sophisticated communities for thousands of years without creating the kind of pollution that we're seeing from open net pen fish farms today. As a guest on this land, introducing many guests on this land to this press conference, I think we owe a lot to the Mi'kmaq Nation and the knowledge and wisdom that they have about how to create and maintain happy, sustainable, and vibrant communities along our coasts here in Mi'kma'ki. So fish farming is really having a moment right now. It's on people's minds across the country, on both coasts certainly. And while we're here in Nova Scotia asking, is anybody listening to us? The federal government seems to have been listening a little more intently to folks on the West Coast asking the same questions. Recently, the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, well, not recently, in 2005, so 20 years ago, the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans promised to end open net pens. And then 20 years later, it's now, and after a federal court decision and significant delay, there has now been issued what some people are calling an eviction notice of 2029, 5 years from now, to salmon feedlot operators in British Columbia. This is a 5-year extension on what could have been an immediate eviction, but it is movement nonetheless. So while there's movement on the West Coast, we're gravely concerned about the Nova Scotia government's plan to expand this polluting industry here on the East Coast without the community consultation that they promised. So 12 years ago, back in 2012, many people here in this room, I was there and recognized many faces. We held a rally at the Lord Nelson Hotel with hundreds of people in attendance, concerned about the same issues around fish farms. And it's obvious that there's much greater awareness today to the damage that is caused to our oceans by open net pen feedlots. So we're here today gathering with the Healthy Bays Network. It's a province-wide organization that is determined to get open net pen salmon feedlots out of our bays. We have supporters in every nook and cranny of Nova Scotia. We are local, it's a community-based organization, and we're nonpartisan. Our goal is straightforward and has been from the beginning. We don't want open net pen feedlots in our bays. We're not opposed to agriculture broadly, we're simply opposed to the feedlot version. But the question of today is anybody actually listening to us? So the Premier himself recently traveled to Liverpool this winter, and he suggested that from his personal perspective, he did not favor any expansion in Liverpool Bay. And then he proceeded to postpone indefinitely the hearings of the Aquaculture Review Board, and then he appointed a brand new chairperson. So without these hearings by the board, the aquaculture, they can't approve Cook Aquaculture's license to restock their pens. And in fact, Cook has been restocking and expanding their pens beyond the lease areas that exist anyway for years, and that lease extension is now even more delayed, but they're continuing their practices. So this one company, Cook, for example, made it clear that they plan to continue their operations in Bayswater, Nova Scotia without the license being renewed. This highlights the offending company's persistent disregard for coastal communities who don't want to see this destructive behavior in their bays. And the arrogance of going ahead with this unauthorized, unapproved restocking is really quite incredible. For example, if I was to build a house on the coast without a permit and I straight pipe my sewage straight into the ocean, I'd be slapped with a hefty fine immediately. But when open net pen companies are doing the same thing for years, where's the accountability? Where's the oversight? Why isn't the government intervening? These are the questions we have today. Is anybody listening to us? So let's hear from our experts. I'm going to introduce them in this order that they'll be speaking. So we'll start over on the far end with Lil. Lil McPherson is the founder and co-owner of the Wooden Monkey and is generously hosting us here today in her restaurant. Her major concern has been for quite some time local food security and climate change, and she's a leading proponent of Off the Table, which is a restaurant program designed to remove net pen salmon from menus. After Lil, we'll have Heather Mullick from the Coldwater Lobster Association, and she'll provide a perspective on the harvest of wild fisheries in the province and the threat that open net pens represent. Then we'll hear from Simon Ryder Burbage.
You can call me Cider.
I'll call you Cider from now on. Simon works at the Ecology Action Center, and this organization has been taking a thoughtful and scientific approach to dealing with the challenges of this business model of open net pens represents. Then we'll hear from Brian Muldoon from Protect Liverpool Bay, who will speak directly about what it's like to live with open net pens in your community and in your line of sight at all times. compounded by the threat of expansion and how his community has organized to fight back. Then we'll hear from Andrew Clark, the Atlantic Salmon Federation, whose organization has spoken and acted for many years on behalf of our wild salmon populations. And finally, closest to me, we have Stuart Lamont from Tangier Lobster, who first spoke publicly at the Lord Nelson at that rally I mentioned 12 years ago, and he's been on this file doggedly ever since. So I'll ask each of our speakers to keep it to 5 minutes. I might give you a little signal when it's time. And then we'll have plenty of time for the media to ask questions. So we'll prioritize questions from the media and then questions from the audience. So if everyone wants to take your turn, please go ahead. Thank you.
Great, you put me first. I will read my speech because I will sit here all day, lock the doors, and talk about this subject. So I'll try to keep it short. I have been in the food industry for 48 years and worked in many places, all serving industrialized, produced food. Yes, I come from fast food nation. I started studying the health impacts of food production from start to finish because I had a health crisis at an early age that sent me in that direction. As an owner of 2 restaurants, I take great pride.
Just move this closer to you.
Is that better?
Yes.
I'll keep going though, right?
Yeah.
Can't start again. As a restaurant owner of 2 restaurants, I take great pride in deciding what goes on our customers' plates. My homework 20 years ago on open pen farm salmon showed me that it comes with so much environmental damages to so many things, and it comes with a heavy load of toxic ingredients. It was an instant never on our plate. And I'm proud to say in 20 years, we've never served it, and we never will.
Yes!
I used to get in trouble about that too. People pressured me. Nope. I honestly would not feed that to my dog. I love my dog. So how could I feed it to my customers, knowing with every bite they are ingesting a fish that swam in a petri dish of disease, sea lice, bacteria, untreated waste, dangerous pesticides, antibiotics, PCBs, and red dye. Anybody hungry? Yes, this industry must feed farm salmon red dye. So we'll have that pink color, this illusion of health. Without the dye, it would be very grayish and very unappealing on one's dinner plate. And that's not good for the farm industry, is it? We have lost control. We've lost our moral compass in healthy food production in so many ways. Salmon is one of the worst because it's high below the water. No one can see what's going on, except for people living close to one. I'm sure we'll hear about that from Brian. These extra ingredients can cause serious health risks to humans. I'm talking about food here, just to remind you. Just one, the overuse of antibiotics causes resistance in salmon, leading to larger quantities and more powerful drugs. Studies have found that antibiotic-resistant genes in farm salmon can make their way into the human body and can contribute to the antibiotic resistance in people. That is happening now. So the question is, why are they feeding open pen salmon antibiotics in the first place? Because of their concentration camp cage production. You cannot put any unnatural number of anything, confined animals, fish, humans, into a cage without it being a breeding ground for disease. It's impossible. So, before they get sick and die, because they would, they must feed them antibiotics. It's an insurance on their production. By giving the salmon all these extra toxic ingredients, this means that even eating open pen farm salmon just a few times a month could lead to unhealthy accumulations of toxins. Okay, so all these hazardous chemicals I'm talking about. Now, I'm not talking about working at a hazardous job site or hanging around a gold mine pit and going to swim in a toxic tailing pond. I'm not talking about that. We're talking about sitting at home at your dinner table with your family and eating salmon. We all need to ask the question, should food be this toxic and dangerous? Of course it shouldn't be. What really makes me angry and peeved off, they took this toxic salmon production model and put it in the big, wide open ocean along the shorelines of Nova Scotia to share their toxic ingredients to other sea life. This industry is out of control in our oceans, and it needs to stop. And what really pisses me off, this is our time to rant, right? This industry has convincing everyone in the world that this salmon is a healthy choice for your family and to eat it often. They have also taken one of the most important keystone species and one of the top healthiest foods in the oceans and made it into one of the most toxic foods on the planet. Congratulations, Cook, you did it. 5 more years of this and they just might wipe out the last of our wild salmon stocks. This has got to stop. But we are proud to be a restaurant joining the campaign Off the Table with other restaurants and chefs to remove open pen salmon off the table. If you're going to purchase salmon, please just buy on land produced. That is chemical free and is a controlled production. And one more thing. Open pen salmon cost taxpayers millions and millions of dollars in subsidies and crop failure payments. I wonder why. They are tax suckers. Us small businesses, we're tax collectors. They are the poster child for corporate welfare. Just saying. Thank you.
That one's not very good. Let's try this one. Yeah, I can't quite be checking.
No, that one, I'd say we're having.
Oh, is that one good?
I think them both be there.
Okay.
Please,
They're not the ones, the thing is I can't bring the levels up any higher or we're gonna get feedback.
Okay.
Because as soon as I bring them up, give them
What if we
that
just
one.
use this one?
Yeah.
Can you hold it?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now bring that one up a little louder. Go ahead, speak into it.
I'm going to do mine again. I'm going to do mine again.
Don't be afraid
Is
to
this-
get close to the mic.
Is this good?
That's great.
Yeah, that sounds great. First of all, good morning, everyone, and I'm really happy to see so many people coming out to listen to what we have to say on open pen salmon aquaculture. When I was first approached to present today, I'll be honest, I was a little unsure of which direction I should take on the topic of open pen aquaculture. The environmental destruction to the environmental ecosystem, the lack of regulatory oversight for this sector, the spreading of misinformation by aquaculture proponents, and concealing scientific research. But in the end, I felt it was best to discuss the importance of the lobster fishery to the province of Nova Scotia and why open pen finfish aquaculture, namely salmon aquaculture, poses such a threat to the lobster fishery. Commercial fish harvesters share a common concern for the ecological health and future of our coastal waters. These waters, which are our waters, provide for the livelihoods and support our local and rural coastal communities, all while significantly contributing to the province's GDP. Lobster harvesters contribute to an industry valued in excess of $3 billion in lobster exports alone, which in turn creates tens of thousands of jobs on and off the water throughout our province. This is a really important statistic to acknowledge, as there appears to be a misconception by many Nova Scotians that after the groundfish moratorium in 1992, the commercial fishery was an industry of the past. This couldn't be further from the truth. The tax base from our commercial fisheries and the economic prosperity that the commercial fishing industry brings to many rural communities in Nova Scotia is unmatched. The employment opportunities provided by the aquaculture sector in our province is in stark contrast to the direct employment provided by the commercial fishing sector. Aquaculture operations account for well short of 1,000 jobs, most of which are part-time. To be clear, the inshore commercial fishing industry is not anti-aquaculture. Shellfish, such as oyster and mussel, and marine plant aquaculture operations have been unfairly categorized under the same umbrella as open pen, finfish, aquaculture operations, which have unquestionably caused substantial ecological degradation globally. Shellfish beds allow for bivalves to clean the waters they filter feed and serve as habitats for smaller benthic organisms or passerbyers such as lobster, crab, or whelk. It's open pen salmon aquaculture that the inshore commercial fish harvesters are not supportive of. Farm salmon is often spoken of in terms of addressing the global food insecurity concern. And while it's likely true that the global population will hit 50 million by 2050, placing our marine ecosystems at risk is nothing short of irresponsible. There is potential for the aquaculture sector to grow in our province, but it needs to be administered in a responsible, sustainable manner. The regulations, or lack thereof, and enforcement of these regulations for open pen, ocean-based salmon aquaculture is concerning to those within the fishery, and should be a concern for all Nova Scotians. The common practices tied to open pen salmon operations pollute the waters with untreated waste, including antibiotics and growth hormones. They deplete dissolved oxygen levels, become intensive breeding grounds for infectious salmon anemia and other serious diseases and parasites, all while placing other wild pelagic and benthic species at risk, including lobster. Given that the technology exists for this sector, the only finfish aquaculture lease applications that should be considered by the province are operations that are land-based and use recirculating systems and have a solid effluent treatment plan. Farmed salmon operations have been operating under loose regulations and infrequent and insufficient monitoring, and this needs to stop. Salmon aquaculture development can coexist as land-based operations without damaging the province's main economic driver. With the advancements in technology, aquaculture companies could easily transition to land-based operations, but will continue to resist this transition and dispel science-based evidence of their destructive ocean-based practices in an effort to maximize their profits and appease their shareholders. The out-of-sight, out-of-mind business practice helps with reducing the needed capital investment. And as Douglas Franz and Catherine Collins pointed out in their exceptional reads, Salmon Wars, cities and towns must treat their sewage, yet salmon farms simply leave it in place on the seafloor, and fecal matter depletes the oxygen levels on the seabed and smothers the marine life. Waste management for farm salmon operations is an afterthought, but not a concern for the operators. Now on to lobster. Female lobsters migrate into coastal bays, inlets, and shallow waters to release their eggs. These areas act as nurseries for the next generation or cohort of lobster, one of the primary reasons a lobster fishery has seasons. Depending on the size and health of the female lobster and the environmental conditions, the number of eggs she releases can be in the tens of thousands, yet only a very small percentage will succeed to maturity. In fact, for every 50,000 eggs released, less than 1% of those eggs will mature to later be harvested. Open pen salmon aquaculture within these inlets and bays, and these are the same locations that we tend to fish, where aquaculture companies look to expand their operation, further adds to the stressors and ecological destruction of many of these nursery beds and impacts the juvenile lobster growth success. The aquaculture sector is overseen by the provincial government, and while the inshore fishing sector would love to see the federal government, namely DFO, impose a moratorium on open pen finfish aquaculture operations like they did on the West Coast, it's not likely we'll see such a development anytime soon, but we'll continue to voice our valid concerns on this issue. One of the primary concerns voiced by fishermen's associations throughout this entire province on the topic of open pen aquaculture is that the province is acting both as the regulator and the promoter of the aquaculture industry, which blurs the lines and presents the potential for a conflict of interest. There appears to be no clear enforcement agency responsible for the oversight of regulations for the aquaculture industry, for salmon aquaculture. The monitoring and enforcement appears to have been passed from department to department. When environmental monitoring is conducted, the sites selected tend to be those whereby the flushing rate is exceptionally high, such as the Bay of Fundy, and not reflective of the majority of aquaculture sites throughout our province. The environmental monitoring has not been thorough, as sediment analysis and toxicology of nearby marine species is rarely conducted, if ever. Moving forward, the regulatory body needs to be clearly identified and play a more active role in this enforcement and protect our province's most valuable fishery, the lobster fishery. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Heather. Can everyone hear me now that I have 3 microphones? Nice to see everyone here. My name is Simon Ryder-Burbidge. I'm with the Ecology Action Center. I've been working now with the Healthy Bays Network and some of these fine folks and folks in the room here now for more than 4 years. And in putting this together, I was reflecting on the time that we came together back in 2020. Many of you will remember the time that Cermak Canada came to town. Cermak Canada, of course, is our favorite subsidiary of Mitsubishi. They spent 2 years in Nova Scotia assessing the suitability of our waters. Hearing almost everywhere they went that Nova Scotians were surprisingly not very enthusiastic about cramped cages, tons of feces, antibiotics, pesticides, and dead fish occupying their local harbors. Cermak, of course, packed up and left, stating in the end that they couldn't find enough appropriate sites for development. And I thought it would be worth remembering Cermak and remembering that acknowledgement that they made about Nova Scotia, given that we now have a provincial government embarking on a coastal classification project to determine green zones for these very same polluting fish farms in the bays and harbors that we love. Think about this. How can it be that an international corporation like Cermak was unable to find 15 suitable sites for fish farm development in Nova Scotia. And yet, somehow, our own government representatives spending public dollars are attempting to do the very same thing, sometimes against the will of the communities that they represent. When are we going to let this go, is the question. You heard earlier that we had a similar rally well before my time in 2012. Here we are again. And guess what? Something else happened in 2019 that Robin mentioned. It's worth remembering today. The federal government committing to the transition away from open net pens entirely in the Pacific. Many of you have no doubt seen that court case reported on that basically enabled the federal government to continue that process, and then the announcement doubling down. The end of the era of the net pen for good in British Columbia. This, of course, to the benefit of wild Pacific salmon and all the people who rely on, who love and rely on those wild populations. And still, here on the East Coast, where provincial jurisdiction rules, we continue to face the massive industrial fish farming expansion plans on the south coast of Newfoundland and, of course, here at home, where cook developments at Liverpool Bay, Canadian salmon developments in St. Mary's Bay, and others would more than quadruple the number of farmed salmon produced in this province today. If that decision in BC is truly based on science and conservation and on the protection of wild salmon stocks, how can we fail to see the same truth here? East Coast fish farms create all the same sea lice, all the same disease, all the same escapes, and the same threat to the wild Atlantic salmon populations that we still have here hanging on by a thread. And don't be fooled, preventing the extirpation of wild salmon stocks in Atlantic Canada has nothing to do with jurisdiction. It has everything to do with scientific fact and a moral compass to take action. And you might hear from some that the regulations in Nova Scotia are up to the task of preventing harm to wild salmon stocks and to local marine ecosystems. Let's revisit Robin's initial comments about Bayswater Beach, where at Saddle Island, Cook recently released a restocking plan that asserts their continued operation at that site for more than 6 months after their current license is set to expire. Here we see a company that's so entitled to our public waters that they can't even be bothered to align restocking with the end of their license. They can't even be bothered to pretend that our regulations are worth respecting in this case, and a number of others that, ask around the room. Folks will tell you all kinds of other stories. Anyway, to wrap up, I want to emphasize a new path forward. This is a path where we encourage Premier Houston to follow his intuition at Liverpool Bay. We encourage Premier Houston to follow his opinion in acknowledging that Liverpool Bay is no place for fish farming expansion. We encourage a path forward where other MLAs hear their communities on this and find the strength and the leadership to act, and a path where after more than 20 years of conflict over this industry in Nova Scotia, we shift our focus to the protection of existing sustainable fisheries, tourism jobs that support existing coastal livelihoods, and the mosaic of sustainable aquaculture opportunities in shellfish and sea plants, oysters, mussels, scallops, kelp, etc., that could offer hundreds, if not thousands, of good, solid jobs in rural Nova Scotia without profiting at the expense of the ocean that we live, work, and play on. That's the future that I hope for. That's the future that we hope for at the EAC. That's the future we're working towards at the Healthy Base Network. And I hope that you folks will join us in helping to make that future a reality. Get in touch with your MLAs. Empower them to say out loud, publicly, once and for all, with your support, that enough is enough with the salmon farming. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming today. My name is Brian Muldoon. I'm the founder and president of Protect Liverpool Bay. Jeff has a picture coming up here. I'm going to talk to the effects of living by a fish feedlot. They like to call themselves farmers. They're far from it. This is an industrial feedlot operation just hundreds of meters from homes. And this is going to happen around this province. And I'll tell you, no one's listening. We all know, but no one is listening to us. So this is our property, and there's an industrial feedlot barge out there, and it looks pretty peaceful there, but in the winter take 30-foot waves covering, and the waves hide that whole unit, and they get bashed and battered, and every fish in there is just getting torn apart. And the government says, no damage done. So second slide. So this is a close-up of a net pen. In this site here, there's currently 400,000 fish in those 14 pens. If Liverpool has an application forward for 3 sites, adding to this one and 2 more, there would be 1.98 million fish. So I'm going to show you the damage this one small farm does. Do you imagine 5-fold of what's going to happen? So next, Jeff. So in the winter, these huge buoys, they're about 6 feet high and 5 feet around, and they're peppered all around the farm. Kind of unsightly, but I guess they need them. But they come bashing up onto our rocks, and they break open. Now, logically, if you had an airbag in that, we would walk away with a few pieces of broken plastic. Next slide. And that's a big piece of styrofoam. So you think, oh, that's not bad. Just pick up the styrofoam. Next, please. And they're huge. You can tell how big they are. And that styrofoam that's in that clump. Next. That's what happens. Styrofoam lasts about 1,000 years. It doesn't go away. And so this is spread all over. Like hundreds and hundreds of feet and through the grasses, and then it's floating around our cove, and then the marine life comes along. They don't know it's styrofoam. Next. Okay, and it's spread all over. This is just one incident. If I had about an hour, I could give you lots of incidents where this happens. Next. And I didn't put that bird there. That is a marine life eating those beads. They don't know. And this is what happens all the time. Go ahead. And now this is taken back about 4 years ago. I'm still finding, on the paths that dry styrofoam will just come out of the grasses and onto our path. This is one incident. We've had it on Beach Meadows Beach. We've had it in several other locations, and they don't care. They're not listening at all. I've written to Transport Canada and to the minister, just change do step 1. Change the styrofoam to a solid piece, so when this happens, we can walk away with it and with less environmental destruction. And we met with Minister Kent Smith, and he said, that's an easy fix. Well, the ministers before it didn't do anything. I don't think they're going to plant. They're not listening. Next. So this is Beach Meadows Beach. It's a gorgeous beach. And who would ever think of putting a fish feedlot within maybe 400, 500 meters from a pristine beach? And we see the sludge. Like we see when they clean the nets, that the sludge of nasty seaweed that's coming off them, and it comes washing up. And I've walked many beaches in the world, and sand will just fall off your shoes when it dries. Not here. Beach Meadows Beach is the only beach that you can get the sand embedded into your shoes, and days later it does not come off. Why? Because it's the sludge and everything coming from that farm, and that's only 400,000. Let's put 1.98 million there. Go ahead. Noise. Do you think that feed barge is quiet? As soon as I open the patio door, step out, look at that. It's a generated diesel, whatever, generator, and it hums. So that's a decibel reading I took. Now it's equivalent, and it's actually health hazards for listening to noise over 74 is a health hazard. I wrote in, explained, they shrugged me off and said, no. So this is 86. So that's a food processor. Well, we usually for 2 seconds and food is processed. 18 hours going straight, listening to that. Steady, even with our windows closed. So this is what they want to do all the way around the province. I'm trying to stop. You know, that's why I said, no, we can't wreck Nova Scotia. It's our ocean's playground. And I guess the last one is, so we started PLB, Protect Liverpool Bay. The town was going to let them in because they went, oh, we'll bring you jobs. And I said, like hell they will. So I started off by standing on the busiest corner of Liverpool with my sign saying, everyone become aware of what we are being faced with here. So, and we're mighty and we're strong. And I want to thank you for being a part of this and let me be a part. And thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Robin. Thanks for having me, Healthy Bays. And so, my name is, everybody can hear me okay? So, my name's Andrew Clark, and I'm the Director of Conservation Campaigns for the Atlantic Salmon Federation. We're 75 years old last year. We were founded in 1948, and today we have 40 staff throughout Quebec and Atlantic Canada, representing tens of thousands of ASF members and volunteers. Our values are clear: wild salmon, wild rivers. We conduct scientific research, we lead complex habitat restoration projects, we advocate for land and protections, and we are opposed to the expansion of salmon farms. Let me tell you why. Wild salmon and farm salmon don't mix. Everywhere that we have sea cages, like the Bay of Fundy, the Atlantic coast of Nova Scotia, and the south coast of Newfoundland, wild salmon in the area are considered threatened or endangered. There is a mountain of research that shows how and why salmon farms cause and contribute to the devastation of wild Atlantic salmon populations, despite what the industry or regulators have told you. For example, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans have reported on numerous occasions their concerns, the threats, and the risks, and yet the provinces and the industry ignore it. Anywhere there is a salmon aquaculture in proximity of a wild salmon river, the wild salmon pay the price. Escapees from salmon aquaculture cages go up a wild salmon river and breed with wild salmon and ultimately affect their survival. It's like well, I can't use the analogy because Jeff will get mad at me, but anyway, it takes just a few aquaculture fish to pose a threat to a river that is under restoration due to the salmon stocks being so low. In a situation where conservation efforts are bringing back a total of 75 to 100 adults, which is an excellent start, an escape event at a salmon aquaculture site of less than 30 fish will threaten the conservation efforts and will likely go unreported by the industry. The traceability and responsiveness to recapture doesn't exist, nor does the genetic sharing of information to hold any one farm accountable. This is highly problematic in a farming industry. Sea lice are a problem for all salmon and are present in salmon aquaculture. This poses significant threat to juvenile salmon, which we call smolts, as they begin their migration every spring. When the salmon aquaculture site is in on the migration route, they attract migrating smolts, and this is where the dangerous mix occurs, as 5 to 7 sea lice attached to a smolt is considered lethal. The ISA virus, which was mentioned earlier, is another deadly issue that plagues salmon aquaculture, the last issue being June 9th in Newfoundland. And the transmission of such a virus through the water is highly dependent on water temperature, current, and overall depth. Very hard to gauge. If a wild fish is affected, it's deadly and it can be transmitted. Regulations for salmon aquaculture, for the salmon aquaculture industry, which are directed by each province, are 10 years behind the rest of the world, as told to us by a senior executive within the industry itself. Additionally, the standards, which are prevalent in other farming, such as beef and poultry, do not exist to the extent they should with salmon aquaculture. The coastline and ocean is world class. So should the regulations. We should be leading the world on how to do this right, not 10 years behind. The lack of regulations and standards are a massive red flag. Economically, conservation and restoration efforts along with recreational salmon angling with subsequent spin-offs in Atlantic Canada is just behind other fisheries like crab and lobster fishing. There are thousands of licenses sold, shops to support them, lodges with food, guides and wages to operate them, and other businesses that are highly dependent on residents and visitors to enjoy this activity. Not to mention the countless hours of public in support of conservation efforts to restore wild salmon rivers. Given the strength of an industry, why would we consider putting this at risk for a few jobs and comparatively small industry? The juice just isn't worth the squeeze. This is why at ASF we're siding with thousands of concerned Nova Scotians and other Atlantic Canadians. We do not want to see any expansion of this industry, at very least until the province as the regulator and the industry as a whole proves themselves. Too much at stake and not enough economic benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Stuart Lamont. I'm the Managing Director of Tangier Lobster Company. I've discovered it's rather lonely to be the sixth person on a six-person panel. You don't know quite what your colleagues will say, and you don't know quite what will be left to conclude at the end. Fortunately for me, that's never a problem. Those who know me know that I'm always comfortable to think of an angle, of an argument, or a compelling reason why we have to take action on open net pen aquaculture in this province. It's very simple. We have to get the damn net pens out of the water. All I really have to do is channel my inner William Shatner. I wish I could say I was here by popular demand, but I'm not. I'm here because I'm the voice of rally protests in the past. I did speak at the 2012 Lord Nelson event. It was a success, as we all have suggested here this morning. It was a success in the sense that we raised consciousness, but it was not a success in the sense that we did not change public policy. I tried on that day, as Heather and I are trying to do today, I tried to speak for the lobster community. I tried to suggest that we weren't opposed to aquaculture. We favored shellfish aquaculture. We favor on-land closed containment aquaculture. We just don't like and cannot tolerate the net pen variety. I remember that event as if it were yesterday. I thank the government of the day and the salmon company applicants for bringing us together. We in the lobster sector, fishermen and dealers, exporters, don't always get along, but they brought us together then, and they bring us together now. This is too important not to take action, and Healthy Bays Network is the voice of overwhelming community-based concern around this entire province. 2 quick points, if I may. It is bitterly ironic that the whole world is in transition against the traditional model of open net pen fish farms, and we here in Atlantic Canada appear to be oblivious to that. They've seen the light in Chile, which used to be the most permissive jurisdiction in the world for net pen activity. After there's been sufficient damage done to their coastal waters, the current government said, no way, we're not having it anymore. We can turn to the state of Washington. The state of Washington has expelled Cook aquaculture from their coastal waters due to the damage that was inflicted upon those same coastal waters. They said, we don't want this ever again. We can even look to Norway, the original home of salmon aquaculture. Norway's government is now imposing massive taxes on the proprietors, on the salmon farming companies, to try to offset some of the damage that's been done in that country. And we've also made reference here on the West Coast. We now have in the last week the official eviction notice of fish farms in British Columbia. Does it take any more? Do we here in Atlantic Canada require any more signals, any more symbols than we've been given throughout the world? I really don't think so. Shame on us if we don't act. Shame on provincial governments over the last 20 years. This is not partisan. Governments of all political stripes have been complicit in this activity, and they continue to be complicit to this day. Secondly, I'd like to simply speak as a lobster exporter. I've been doing this for 43 years. I estimate I've exported over 150 million pounds of live lobster from this province. I'm rather passionate about it. I believe in it. I think it's an excellent resource that reflects all of Nova Scotia. And as Heather has indicated, and Robin before her, this is a $3 billion sector to Atlantic Canada on an annual basis. The last I looked, there weren't a lot of $3 billion sectors in Atlantic Canada. The financial trickle-down from the lobster sector, not just the sale of lobster and the harvesting of lobster, but the financial trickle-down of trucking and packaging and air freight and all the rest of it, it is massive to our community. So we ignore that at our peril. I ask senior members in government, do they really realize the risk we're undertaking? Do we really want to place all of this in jeopardy? We are one viral video away from devastation of our lobster sector. If the right video went to Europe, ironically, showing lobster in Nova Scotia grazing on fecal and food waste around a net pen, the jig would be up. So mine is a call of action this morning. You've heard the background from the various panelists. Time is short, or otherwise we could say so much more. But we collectively say enough is enough. We can't wait any longer. We shouldn't have to wait any longer. We call upon the government to take an obvious lesson from other jurisdictions around the world and remove net pen activity from this province. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. It's been really educational, once again, to hear from you all, from the human and environmental health impacts that open net pens have, to the impact that they have on other industries, including the lobster industry, which Stuart just mentioned is a $3 billion industry in Nova Scotia that has been supporting rural communities forever and is not a highly centralized corporate type of activity, but is an owner-operator thing that really supports families and small businesses. We've heard about the shameful nature with which the Nova Scotia government is blindly turning away from the facts, the science, the community knowledge that Brian has brought to us today, and the risk to wild salmon populations, which are integral to our culture, integral to our tourism industry, and part of this place where we live. So thank you so much for bringing those great perspectives here. So we have some time for Q&A. I want to turn first to the media, as this is a media conference. So we'll turn first to anyone who's a journalist to see if you have any questions, and then if there's time left, we'll turn to the audience. So, questions? Are you with the media?
Yes.
Wonderful.
I'm Richard Bell with the Eastern Shore Cooperator in Muscogee Harbor. I would like to hear from the panelists about the difference in politics on the West Coast and the East Coast.
Great question.
We have this sort of schizophrenic operation going on, and what is it, what is it about the West Coast that worked that doesn't work on the East Coast?
Yeah. So just so everyone can hear, the question was, what's the difference of the politics going on in the West Coast and the East Coast here? Does anyone want to take that? Stuart?
Sure. Richard, I think it starts by being a jurisdictional difference. For reasons that would take far too long to explain or discuss today, on the West Coast in British Columbia, the federal government has jurisdiction over this activity. Here in Atlantic Canada, provincial governments have jurisdiction. That cannot possibly be the case in so many other fields of endeavor. Usually jurisdiction is either federal or provincial and fairly consistent, absolutely consistent across the country, but it's not in this case. So it's a complication that has left us divided, less naturally inclined to join forces, but I'm very pleased to say that our links with the West Coast and Atlantic Canada are dramatically greater than previously. Healthy Bays Network wants to support the progress that's been made in British Columbia, but we'd like that same progress here as well.
Anybody else?
Sure, I can add to that. Yeah, thanks for the question, Richard. I would just add to Stuart's comments that it's incumbent on us to make clear that this really shouldn't be about politics at the end of the day. That this is about as Brian brought up, listening to communities. This is about protecting the environment that we all rely on, and I think for us, we don't want to let the federal government kind of hide behind these jurisdictional concerns. That's part of what I wanted to convey, is that this isn't a jurisdictional question. There are other factors at play that should really govern the decision-making processes here. And we can see through that, and people see through that at the community level. We see through that in this room, and it's time for us to get away from the politics on this and just be consistent with how we're treating our marine ecosystems across the country.
Thanks for that question. I see Zane and then our friend over here.
A few of you talked about land-based salmon farming. How do you think the government should, or should the government be incentivizing that industry, incentivizing that transition away from toward land-based circulating systems?
Just so everyone in the room can hear, the question was, how should the government be incentivizing the transition to land-based operations? Any takers?
I hate that question. Well, I love that question, but it's not, they shouldn't need incentivizing. It's like, here's some money if you do the right thing. I kind of don't want that. Just kick them out and tell them to do the right thing. I mean, that's a tough question. So they should just do the right thing. They don't give them any money. Or maybe. We're always giving them money.
I think it's something that should be considered in places where, as the transition's happening out west, there is room to help communities working on open net pen sites today. If that's an option and something that people in those communities support, then that we kind of leave that question up to the federal government to consider that. I think for us, as you've heard today, our intention is just to get the pens out of the water. I think promoting a land-based closed containment industry, we sort of leave up to other folks for the most part. We have our objectives are clear here, and the thing that brings us together is clear, and that's protecting the marine environment. So what happens beyond that, we leave to others.
I also,
Here, let's pass
Yeah.
it to
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, it's public money, it's not the government money, right? So it's really up to you where you want the government to allocate the money. And so they've already dumped hundreds of thousands and, well, you know, essentially millions into open net pen aquaculture across Atlantic Canada. And so, you know, what's the next step? I think the natural next step is to look at, you know, not only land-based, but there are a lot of other proteins which are very readily available, and I think that's the education piece that needs to happen. The need for salmon through salmon aquaculture is a self-fulfilling prophecy that they created in the 80s. There is a lot of protein on this earth that can be had through vegetables or through animals, whoever, you know, your choice is, and it doesn't have to always be salmon.
I should be asking folks to introduce themselves also when they ask questions, so please go ahead.
Mark Krause on Sheet Harbor Radio. Waiting for politicians to help us is, that's a, boy, self-fulfilling prophecy. It ain't never going to happen. I think the approach needs to be to have the salmon, the open pen industry, give them some disincentives to make it perhaps less advantageous to have open pens in our waters. There are many industries that have ill effects on the environment. Mining comes to mind immediately. There, when you have a mine, you have to remediate the damage that you do. Is there any remediation requirements in an open pen farm license? If there isn't, there needs to be. Hit them in the pocketbook. See what we can do in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only way that we're going to make any headway here, I think, by disincentivizing open pen farming.
Thanks, Mark, for the question. For those who didn't hear, the question is there any requirement for remediation at the end of a license or lease? I think it's a simple question, simple answer maybe.
Yeah, no, there's not. Yeah, no.
What a surprising answer.
Yeah.
So let's get on the ball here and ask our politicians, our license granters, to say, fix what you're destroying.
Yeah.
Not hard to do. Give them a new toy to play with.
We would agree with that. You know, in Norway, some licenses, when they come up for renewal, the license fee itself is over $1 million, right? So they understand the value of their coast, and they are regulating the aquaculture folks that are using that resource appropriately. There's a reason why people are here.
Free.
Right. So there's a reason why people come so far. There's, you know, when you have, you know, Norway organizations that are doing business in Atlantic Canada versus doing business at home, right? Because it's more cost effective because there's less regulations. So, and I think that's an important part of why they're here, and that's why their regulations are 10 years behind. They want to make it attractive for them to come. And I think, you know, as Atlantic Canadians and as Nova Scotians, we have to stand up for our value of our coastline and charge them world-class pricing.
I love when an answer has a single word at the beginning anyway. Are there any other questions from the media? Go ahead.
Yvette D'Entremont with the Halifax Examiner. And I just had a quick question for whoever can possibly take it. And I'm wondering whether any of you have had recent conversations with government, and if so, what kind of messaging have you received about your concerns?
Thanks. So for everyone, the question is, have folks had any recent conversations with government, and what kind of messages are they saying these days?
In short, not a whole lot. Back in 2022, 2 years ago, I guess that's 2 years ago, the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture commissioned or contracted Davis Pier to conduct basically some consulting work on where the Aquaculture Review Board was going, what was working, what was not working, listening to Nova Scotians, talking to industry, including lobster harvesters and other groups, including East Coast Environmental Law, Ecology Action Center, so on and so forth. And we did put recommendations forth on what was not working. And one of the recommendations we put forth, I mean, obviously, first and foremost, we want to see open pen salmon aquaculture out of our waters. So I want to be clear about that. But we do know this is probably going to take time because it is provincial jurisdiction and not federal at this time. But one of the recommendations we put forth was that we wanted the Aquaculture Review Board not simply to look at the application to increase leases or expand them. We wanted them to look into the histories and the violations or any convictions that companies have had in other jurisdictions, whether it was inside Atlantic Canada, outside, different countries, and take that into consideration if they were ever to look to expand or apply for a lease site within our waters. For us, we felt that the histories of these companies need to be taken into consideration. It's not simply just an application. We want to come in, we're going to grow some fish in your waters, there's not going to be any issues. And there's so many different angles we can talk about on this. When you think about the amount of harm this is doing to our coastal waters, it is unfathomable. I just can't understand why we would put our wild species and our marine ecosystems at risk for something that creates so little jobs, that causes so much destruction. But overall, with the conversations we've had with the provincial government, namely Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture, it is their mandate to expand aquaculture, and that's why, at least from the inshore fishing associations, we've been clear on we support shellfish and marine plant, but the open pen just has to go. Why would we put, and I'm only speaking for one fishery. I mean, if you want to start throwing in snow crab or, well, I mean, we're getting kind of off there, or herring or mackerel if that ever opens up again. But $3 billion just on lobster alone, and we would put that at risk? I mean, I really don't think Nova Scotians realize how important this fishery is to this province. If these female lobsters are coming in and laying their eggs, and we have open pen aquaculture in these bays that is harming these juvenile lobster, we're putting that entire fishery at risk again. So from a governmental point of view, I would say we've had very little positive feedback, and we'll just keep pushing and letting it be known that we do not support any further expansion, and we want these out of our waters.
Yeah, well said, Heather. I think I'll just add too, like for us, it's really more about taking an approach related to what are they doing rather than what they're saying at any given time. And I think until further notice, we have an aquaculture review board process that looks really unfair for communities. And until further notice, we have a coastal classification project that is looking to green light particular areas around this province for expansion. So, Robin mentioned in 2021 a campaign commitment to consult Nova Scotians on the future of this industry. We haven't seen that. So until further notice, we're assuming that, like, between coastal classification, the review board process, until those things are fixed, corrected, dropped, or whatever, and we can return to that campaign commitment that people elected this government on, that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, so we meet with them on a regular basis, and it's I think that they lean in to Simon's point. You don't see a lot of results coming from that outcome for sure. We saw an incredible amount of plastics and rope and debris along the shoreline, like 3 to 3.5 feet high in the southern coast of Newfoundland. Brought that aware to them, and there was no cleanup effort made yet. So we'll likely do that ourselves, along with the First Nations group that lives there. So yeah, they play a lot of lip service, but you don't necessarily get the results that you're looking for. I think that they want the dollars from everything, basically, and I think that's where we have to stand up and say that you're not able to get the dollars from this industry, because it is a small industry, really, as industries go that are operating in Atlantic Canada.
I don't think I'm telling tales out of school. I sit on the Minister's Advisory Committee on Aquaculture. I have for 2.5 years. I think the prevailing view of the government, and it hasn't changed regardless of the partisan stripe, the prevailing view is we can do this better, we can improve it. And I've had various senior government people tell me it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. Well, that is setting the bar about as low as you could set it. I would agree it's not as bad as it used to be. It's 93% as bad, but it's not 100%. I mean, the government thinks this can be done. We are of the view within the Healthy Bays network that open net pen fish farms do not work under any circumstance. They cannot be made appropriate for the coastal waters of this province. End of story.
Thanks. I heard a question over in this. Oh, yes.
And if I could ask Stuart to pass that microphone over to Mr. Muldoon, if you don't mind. And the reason why I'm reaching out to you, Mr. Muldoon, is that I reached out to Culture this morning. They actually referred to this event as a farce. Those are words that were in the email that was exchanged to me. But anyway,
Don't get me going.
But they said that the proposed expansion to Liverpool is paused. And I'm just wondering how, is that news to you? Or how do you feel? And do you feel,
Yeah, so
do you feel a trust there?
the application was put before the ARB last September. During that time, they had 5 years to look at the application. We had 10 days to get interveners organized and put in, or we would be rejected. So it went before the ARB. PLB has hired EcoJustice to assist us with the ARB hearing. Things happened, and they adjourned the application process to further notice. And from my understanding, they're reviewing the whole process of the ARB. And it's before the minister, and they will come up with a decision. So it hasn't been canceled, it's adjourned.
What do you feel about them calling this event a farce?
I've had to deal with cook aquaculture over the last 6 years. Many times I have them on my cell phone. I direct dial and say, "There's a buoy missing. It's floating down. We don't want to hit the rocks. Please come and get it before any damage is done." And we say, "Thank you," and they come and do it. Great. Other times, for instance, the decibel reading, I got to speak to Mr. Joel Richardson at an event in Blandford, and I showed him the decibel readings, and he basically called me a liar, and he said that could be a truck going by. So and it's funny because the government, the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture, when there's a sound problem, they tell us to call the Department of Environment. So I call the Department of Environment, they come over and they go, "Oh, it's not our area, you have to call the Department of Aquaculture." I have this in writing. So is the government listening? Is the government working with the community? No.
What a concept. Executive of a company making a lot of pollution, not listening to the people who live across the street from that pollution. Wow. Any other questions from the media?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that there are a lot of additives to salmon food feed in exposed areas that are a risk to children. And I would say that if you focus on that, it's important. And very few politicians are standing up and saying, "I'm for harming children or the unborn." And that's a legitimate thing, and there's a score of chemicals that are in that category. If that were focused on, and you say, in addition, that the failure to act on the jurisdictional examples across Canada and the world show that there's a clear failure to protect children's health.
Thank you. This was a comment about protecting children's health, and that might be a useful angle for this campaign. I just want to check before we get into questions and comments from the audience, which will be welcome. I want to double check with the media. Are there any remaining questions? Mark?
I'm struck by the reference to the 2012 conference. That was 12 years ago. There's no indication that political structure of the province feels threatened by people who are advocating for this issue, that whatever has been done over the last 12 years has not affected them. So I'm wondering what, looking forward, one would be doing either different or more intensely to change that climate. The Premier has said he might call it a snap election instead of waiting. Why would anybody who's running for MLA be concerned about whether their continuation in office depends on their position on this issue?
Just for everyone to hear, the question is, what's changed over the last 12 years politically? Why would anyone running for MLA feel threatened by this issue, and what kind of different approaches is the coalition taking at this time? I'll turn it to Stuart.
I think that's the very point, Richard, of why we're here. Not enough has changed. I think the purpose of this exercise, we'd like to get the message out that there's a province-wide concern in coastal communities that this doesn't cut it, that we need to become engaged with our political representatives to a greater degree than we ever have in the past. And while we might have been confident in 2012 that we had turned the corner, we're pretty sanguine and realistic today. We know this must be made an issue, and enough is enough.
Do you wish Wilmer Shatner was here? Wilmer Shatner's here. I want to talk like him, but anyway. I do want to comment on your comment about the health. It is advised for pregnant women not to eat salmon, And it's very, very high in PCBs, which accumulate in the salmon fat, and they're saying it's really, there's a lot of studies saying that it helps. It's against, brain development, and it's really, really bad for prenatal and pregnant women. We need to, and that's what I do. I'm a mother. Mother's against farm salmon. I want to protect my children, and I think we start to go on the health part of it. When I tell people the story, they're like, I'm never eating that again. I said I wouldn't feed it to my dog, so I'm not going to feed it to my customers. Why would I feed it to anybody in my home? So I think there's so many levels of things that we can go to, but I think the health is important, and I thank you for that.
I'd like to follow on to that because I don't know if people are aware there have been no new antibiotics in the last 50 years. My wife actually works in the group and trying to develop this, to get around this problem, because once these are gone, there's going to be no treatment for simple illnesses, there's going to be no surgery because you haven't got an antibiotic coverage. And one of the worst uses for antibiotics, causing the problem, is the use of foodstuffs. The use it with salmon, the use it with pigs. It's a real problem. It's a health problem for everybody. It's going to make COVID actually look like a walk in the park. I think this is a very serious area. What's more is that Canada is representing the G7 next year, leading the development, moving to actually dealing with this problem. So we actually have an opening. Something that could probably bring the whole thing up, and this is a health issue which affects everyone, not just people who live by the coast, not just people who hate the like or something. It affects everyone.
Thank you for that. I'm with you on that, and we'll talk later. But did you know that 50%, over 50% of the antibiotics that are used in Canada are given to farm animals and fish? So it is a dangerous thing for the world. And I know 3 people, just from me, going to the hospital with just a simple infection, and they had to go to 3 different antibiotics because they were already becoming antibiotic resistant. Because you give them the antibiotic, and your body goes, Well, this doesn't matter because you just ate it in salmon last week. You just had a piece of fish. This is what's happening to us, and it's a serious worldwide problem. So it is, and it's a big deal. And they're throwing these antibiotics to all the fish in all the ocean. It's not even contained, so that's terrifying.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that as well, like in the salmon farming context out west, we've seen our colleagues in BC report on antibiotic resistance on fish farms, and that means that means more antibiotics. That means stronger doses. That means these fish are consuming more, not less, over time, as they're building up resistance to these treatments. And when does that end? I mean, as far as sea lice populations go too, the resistance to these antibiotics, they're developing resistance as well. And that means that, connected to the human health concerns, you're also talking about a greater risk to wild salmon populations going by these sites, like more likely to collect sea lice that, aren't responding to these antibiotic dosages that are being administered on fish farms. And it's a huge problem and something that, can't be overlooked. Actually, Robin, if I could, I'll just also make one more comment about fish feed, which came up. It would be very, I think it's worth mentioning to Zane's comment earlier, related to land-based closed containment. It should be said we can't get away from the fish feed issue, regardless of what type of salmon farming we're doing. There are huge amounts of wild fish that are caught specifically to feed farmed salmon throughout the world. So you're taking a fish that could be consumed directly, and then you're feeding it to make a higher value fish somewhere else that's fed to wealthier consumers at a higher market value. So to the extent that the salmon farming companies are going to tell you they're feeding the world, think twice when you hear that.
Thank you. All right, so we've got about 9 minutes before we've promised to wrap up, so I'll turn it, if there's any questions in the audience, I can run a mic to you. My only request is that your question end with a question mark, and then we will hear about that. So, here you go.
Thank you.
Quick answer is probably all I need. The politicians' go-to is always, whether they're doing something or not doing something, is jobs. My question is, does anybody know if temporary foreign workers are being used by Cook Aquaculture, and are there any in the lobster industry? Thank you.
I could start.
I suspect they're used by Cook Aquaculture, but I wouldn't want to say definitively. They are certainly used in the lobster industry, primarily in the processing sector. Foreign workers, it's a separate issue and a separate file, and I would argue a complication to the primary discussion of can net pens be justified in the water or not. The unfortunate reality is that we do not have enough people in coastal communities throughout Atlantic Canada who want to work in the seafood sector today. Were it not for international foreign workers, huge chunks of lobster processing activity in particular could not take place. People talk about creating jobs. Open net pen fish farms are increasingly automated. They engage fewer and fewer positions on a percentage basis on an annual basis as well. So they don't create jobs. It's laughable. We in the wild fisheries legitimately create jobs. They are better paying full-time jobs all the time now, and the comparison to to say they're creating jobs in net pen aquaculture is, I'll borrow a phrase from Paul's email and call it a farce.
Yep.
It's not a key.
Sorry, Ken. Yeah, I just wanted to add, just on the topic of jobs in general, where is the investment in sustainable shellfish and seaweed jobs? If you look at a province like Prince Edward Island, our much smaller neighbor, smaller population, smaller coastline. We love PEI, of course, but you know they're smaller. We have a ton more space. We have more bays and harbors. We have more people, and yet we have a fraction of the jobs in shellfish in Nova Scotia relative to Prince Edward Island. And that's true. That's true in the other Atlantic provinces as well. We are lagging behind. We are lagging behind in the development of these aquaculture alternatives, which don't cause the same harms that you've all heard all about today in the environment. So, like, let's drop the salmon farming bone at the provincial level, and dive into these protein alternatives that don't cause the harms, that don't need antibiotics, that filter out. That filter out their local marine ecosystems. Sometimes they filter the water so they can help to clean these ecosystems, making in some cases improvements to local habitats. So, like, where's the investment there? If we want to talk about jobs, there's a path forward. Let's work on the sustainable shellfish and sea plant industry, shellfish in particular, which has not received the attention that it deserves because of this focus on salmon farming.
I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll all have time for lunch. Meryl?
Hi, I just want to know if there's any data or feedback on how much this industry is actually bringing to the province, and what is the love affair that our government has with this industry when it is so obviously not a good one for it to be supporting.
Sure. Oh, do you want to?
Well, you have 13 million tons last year, right? So I don't know what the market value of that is, but.
Oh, 13 million tons of, no, but what does it do for the province?
Well, I know that honestly, I would love to go up against a salmon farm. And I would like to go up against them in an economic way and to see that what the outcome would be economically and environmentally at this model here. Because we're in business, we employ sometimes 70 people. We employ a lot of farmers. They employ people, and there's a multiplier effect in that. It's a business alliance for a local living economy, and that actually is Nova Scotia. And there is it's a multiplier effect. When you buy something from Nova Scotia, it stays in Nova Scotia, and it goes around like a snowball. They're like a cut. You look at money as blood, and a healthy body needs blood to move around the body. You keep it moving. That's Nova Scotia. That's the money going around this province. They're just cutting all over the place. They're shooting the money outside this province. They're not giving anything. But I would love to go up against them, business to business, job to job, economic, environment, all that stuff. I'd love to go up against them. I know we'd win with this model. Anyway.
Great. Well, it is noon, so I have the duty to wrap us up. I want to say thank you very much to all of our panelists. It's clear that the people that you're like you yourselves and the people you're representing within the Healthy Bays Network, what's going on. We can see the writing on the wall, we can see the damage being done, and we can see the alternative in front of us. And so the question of today is anybody listening? And I guess my final plea is, listen up, it's time. So I'd like to thank everyone in the audience for joining us, and the media, of course. We want to say special thanks to all the folks who did the TV and audio today, especially Mike Hall of Atlantic Livestream, Duncan Moss and iMove, helping get this all going, and Kelly Mercer, who's been helping stage these events for years. So thank you, everyone. You're invited to hang around for a little while, Lil, where you can have some lunch. People are welcome to stay and enjoy the fine offerings of the wooden monkey. All the panelists will be here if you have more questions or want to chat. So thank you very much for coming. Okay. Oh, Stuart has one final.
On behalf of the steering committee, I would like to thank Robin Tress, our moderator. We changed the date of this event to accommodate Robin's schedule, which tells you how highly we think about her. So thank you, Robin.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Great to see you.